K&A Custom Crafts on Facebook.
Hey everybody, we are back for a special episode, a March Madness special for the Bo and Joe show. We're excited because Adrian's actually right down there live in the action. He said he's just actually waking up. He's been on a bender for 7 days. And of course, Bodine is here as well. He's got his props. Hi, gentlemen. How's it going?
Good afternoon.
I gotta change my hat. I didn't want to wear the blue one. What's up, Joe? How you doing?
I'm well. I can't wait to get the inside scoop from Adrian and hear all about it. I mean, the game last night, the Duke game, was certainly impressive. That was certainly a way to close it out. Coach K's final game. So I believe that retirement is probably going to stick. It's not going to be a Tom Brady. But so let's start to Adrian. Hey, how's it going down there?
It's great. Tiring for an old man. You get out here and you're hanging out and you're usually at home and in bed by 11, something like that. And next thing you know, you're out seeing some people you haven't seen in over 30 some years, and time's flying by. And next thing you know, you get into the room, it's 3 a.m. It's like, oh, okay. So a lot of fun, a lot of activity, exciting atmosphere yesterday. I mentioned on the show on Wednesday that, being able to be here for the final Carolina Duke game, Coach Krzyzewski's potentially last game, and it ended up being his final game. That atmosphere last night was so electric, and then the game just kind of followed that electricity up, and they really delivered, no doubt.
It was an instant classic, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No doubt about it.
So did any of us have the final two?
I do have Kansas in my bracket. Yeah.
All right. So
I have them winning it. But I don't know what's going to happen there. Well, I guess we'll get into that later. We'll hold our
picks. We'll hold our picks until the end, or at least we'll try our best.
So that's exciting. So what did you think of the game, Bodine, from your perspective in PA? It's probably a different. I mean, well, let's ask this, Adrian. How were your seats? I mean, how close were you to the action? And it looks like sometimes you had some amazing seats.
We were. So I guess the only thing is we got our tickets right after Villanova, won the game and got to the Final Four. So not knowing what bench they were going to be on, left or right, we got our tickets and we ended up on the Kansas side. But we had great seats.
You said we. Who's we? Who'd you go with?
A friend of mine that I went to high school with, Joe Wirt.
Mm-hmm.
And he's actually a big Nova fan. Found out it's kind of funny story. So when we got in on Friday, they were running late. So I, got with Dwayne, and he was at the team hotel. So I drove down to the team hotel and we're hanging out there. And, and Joe hits me up with a message, hey, we're going down to the French Quarter. And I was like, no, dude, you need to come here. You need to come to the team hotel. So they came down and it was pretty cool for them. They got to meet Dwayne. They got to meet Ed. And so it was a good night. But something I didn't know was that Joe, who played basketball, Joe's about 6'4". He was a good basketball player. He wore the number 45. And as he was talking to Dwayne, he asked him, he said, you know why I wore the number 45? So he's like, okay, so why'd you wear it? He said, for John Pannone. So I never knew how big a Nova fan Joe Wirt was, that he actually wore the 45 for John Pannone when he was in high school.
That
was a pretty cool story.
And Joe was one of the guys in the photo that you posted on Facebook, on your social media.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, we can.
I said,
hello?
No, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes. He's running in difficulty.
Hello.
Well, listen, while he's doing that, let's introduce Stan and get Stan back on the screen. Stan, can you hear us?
Hi,
Guys,
There we
Stan.
go.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
So let's mute Adrian until he get his thing fixed. Let's go ahead and introduce Stan. Stan, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay.
How you doing?
Wonderful. How are you all doing?
Great. Welcome back to the program, Stan. We're
So
happy
I
to see
think
you.
I lost you.
It's great to be back.
All right. Well, I'm going to message Adrian on the side, and you go ahead, Bodine, and introduce Stan. So
Yeah, and put Adrian on mute. Somebody.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I got him on mute.
Am I delayed, guys? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I'll message him.
Okay. So, Stan, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are excited and privileged to have Mr. Stan Green, for a second opportunity.
All right. Well, I'm in this hotel, so it's tough.
And can Chris mute Adrian?
Yeah, you're kind of going in and out. Okay.
So, Stan, let's start this over again. Ladies and gentlemen, to the program is Stan Green. Stan was a captain of the University of Penn men's basketball team. He was a player at the University of Pennsylvania from 1974 to 1978, a winning Ivy League program. I found this to be interesting. Stan, I did not know you were point guard or shooting guard?
Shooting guard.
Oh, I assumed you were a power forward, but after doing my due diligence, I found out that you were a shooting guard. You were a guard based on your stats, and you had some absolutely impressive numbers. And I'm going to roll off the numbers that I have, and you can add those numbers because you know those numbers better than me. But you were a 78% free throw shooter, 43% from the field. You average roughly 6 to 7 points a game. I could not find your assist per game, but based on those numbers and the time period you played basketball, you were a bad man.
Well, I mean, we our team, by the way, my senior year, our team scored 80 points a game, and we didn't have a 3-point line then. My average probably would have been higher, but for me, it wasn't about the scoring, as it was about 7 points a game. For me, it was about the defense. And interestingly, you guys are talking about Villanova. Well, Villanova, when I first started playing basketball, Villanova was my favorite team. Back then, it was a guy named Howard Porter.
Yes.
Played for Villanova.
Mm-hmm.
And those teams that actually went to the Final Four actually played in a championship game in 71.
Yep.
Against UCLA, John Wooden's UCLA.
Mm-hmm.
I don't tell that to the Penn folks too much because on their way to getting to that Final Four, I was in 9th grade then. I think they played, Penn and Villanova played twice during the year. And then in that tournament, I guess it was in the Elite Eight, Villanova beat Penn by about 40 points. It was one of the most crushing, and it was the first loss that Penn had that year. So, but eventually, I wound up going to Penn, and the guy that recruited me to come to Penn was one of the famed Villanova coaches, Rollie Massimino. Because at that time, when I was in high school, in my junior year, when Penn first noticed me, it was Rollie Massimino that came to my high school game and told my coach, tell him to keep his grades up, Penn's interested. And of course, then he went on to Villanova as the head coach. He was an assistant to Chuck Daly back then, went on to Villanova as the head coach. And then we had another interesting, I guess, encounter. And I read in this book called Palestra Pandemonium that in his first few years, fans were pretty down on Rolly Massimino. They just weren't where the fans expected them to be. But it was a game that when I was a sophomore, they played against us. It was a real tough game, tight game, full house at the Palestra, where the game was tied and I was fouled. I went on the line. I made the first. We were up by 1. I missed the second. There was only a few seconds left. They threw the ball in bounds, and a Villanova player hit a shot from half court, and they won. Their fans were excited. But what I read was that game was the turning point for Rolly Massimino, and from that point on, he started to win. So he has me to thank for that.
So Tom Inglesby was part of that 1971 team, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. Yes.
Right.
Tom Inglesby.
And for those who don't recognize the name of Tom Inglesby, his son coached for Delaware, who we beat the first game of the season, first game of the March Madness tournament. And his other son, Brad Inglesby, is the executive producer, writer, Hollywood star now, based on the program The Mayor of Easttown, which they filmed here in Delaware County, Chester County, New Jersey, Philadelphia, with Kate Winslet, that HBO incredible program. So
didn't realize that.
Yes. I had the opportunity to speak with his production assistant. She read my book and gave me some incredible advice regarding doing a documentary. So we'll talk about that some other time. But yeah, so you are part of what we call the Big Five, right? The Big Five family. It's now 6 teams, but maybe you can go into how the Big Five, if you know about how the Big Five started, that round robin of schools that we play each other, which is really a tournament within itself, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So go ahead, talk about that.
Well, my understanding is the Big Five started sometime in I believe it was mid to late 50s. And, since there were, 5, pretty good, Division I schools, the thought was that they could get together and play each other. And that became just a tremendous institution in Philadelphia for a period of time until, of course, Villanova left to be part of it. They didn't really leave, but they kind of de-emphasized the Big Five. Hey, we got business to do with the Big East, with this new conference called the Big East.
Right.
But back then, it was what basketball in Philadelphia was all about. This rivalry between these 5 schools: St. Joe's, LaSalle, Temple, Villanova, and Penn, who would all play their games at the Palestra. There would be double headers, and it was just the most exciting basketball you could be a part of. Number one, because of the venue, which was the Palestra, which was built in the 1920s, around the time that Duke's Cameron facility was built as well, and as well as Butler's facility. So they had this kind of ambiance. They had this, it was structured so that every seat in the house, roughly about 10,000 fans, every seat in the house was a great seat. And you just felt close to the players. And as a player, I felt that the fans were really close. I mean, the noise level was just extreme because you'd have, 2 cities teams in the case of the Big Five schools. Let's say one of the big games was, St. Joe's and Villanova, that was, one of the games to watch. And just the noise level was tremendous. The fans would have these banners that they would have these really cute ways to kind of throw a dig at the other team, and they would roll them out, and people would laugh, and they were really clever. And then they would pass them down, and then the opposing team would roll their banner out, and so there was all kinds of things going on. But yes, it was just, and it still goes on today. And the goal was to win the Big Five. One of the goals of a Philadelphia team was to win, that Big Five round robin. That and you wind up having the best record, you would be then considered the Big Five champion. So it was always a great thing to be Big Five champion. You certainly want to win the March Madness, but you definitely want to win the Big Five, because if you can beat the other Big Five teams, there's a good chance that you can go on in the tournament, because the programs were just so great. LaSalle had great players, St. Joe's, Villanova, Penn, and Temple. And Temple's still considered one of the, but not considered, but when you look at its record, the 10th winningest program in the country, with Kansas being number 1, Kentucky and Duke being right in there in the top 5. But Temple is number 10. At one point, Penn, when I was there, Penn was in the top 10 as well. But yeah, the Big Five is tremendous history.
Well, that just goes to show you, and obviously rest in peace, John Chaney. John Chaney left Chaney University the year before I got to Chaney, or arrived at Chaney, and he went to Temple and turned Temple into, took it to a new level. And how ironic, John Chaney from my hometown, born and raised, well, he was born, I don't know if he was raised, but he was born in my hometown of Jacksonville, Florida, graduated from Bethune-Cookman and HBCU. So it's just amazing. And I wanted to write about that, more about that in my book, but I thought that would be kind of a stretch, so I didn't. But I knew about John Chaney when I went to Chaney for my freshman orientation. They talked about John Chaney and Vivian Stringer, who was the women's coach who took Chaney to their first, they didn't call it March Madness back then. It was called, the NCAA tournament, right? So she's obviously come a long way in terms of a woman's head coach. But talk about the Pennsylvania Classic. You guys had a Pennsylvania Classic.
Well, hold on one second, Bill Dean. I want to welcome some people from the audience. So we have some people who are. So we have Dave's in here. He's tuning in. Mr. Sanders is here. Hi, Mr. Sanders. Chris Gross. Hi, fellas. You must not see me. Listen on I-10 back to H-Town, and we want to welcome Adrian back into the conversation as well. So all right. So now you're back on, Stan. But I just wanted to acknowledge all those people who've been waiting there in the wings.
Awesome. So Stan, talk about that Pennsylvania Classic. Was that a specific University of Pennsylvania UPenn idea, or a UPenn Classic tournament you guys put on, or how was that created, where you guys played Pitt, Penn State, right? Was that so? Because I'm not familiar with it, because probably when I got to Villanova in 1984, I hadn't heard of that. I was only familiar with what everybody was telling me is wait till you get an opportunity to. Hey, Adrian, can you put your computer on mute? We hear your background noise. I was only familiar with people telling me, wait, you go to Palestra, right? The Palestra is the best, the biggest, the best venue you ever see a basketball game. So talk about that.
Yeah, well, Pennsylvania, there was a, I guess before I got to college, we had a Quaker City Classic. We had various teams. The Big Five is kind of the closest thing to a, Pennsylvania Classic, but it's just Philadelphia. Right. My sophomore year, we did play in something called the Pennsylvania Classic. There was Penn State, Pitt, Duquesne, and us, and University of Pennsylvania. That was a kind of a major game for me. I was a sophomore, and back then in the Ivy League, freshmen couldn't play varsity, so we had to play freshman ball. And by the way, my best game as a freshman was against Villanova. I hit 27, and I wasn't a scorer, but I got 27 against Villanova. So, But a sophomore year, first year on varsity, Chuck Daly's the coach. My role, he told me early on that, Stan, you're going to get a lot of minutes because you play defense. So, I've scored maybe 7 or so a game. But what got me on the court to score, because my role wasn't to score. We had, a guy who's still, the second all-time leading scorer from a point average standpoint, over 20 points a game. Kevin McDonald, was my classmate. We had Tony Price, who in the 1979 Final Four with Larry Bird and Magic Johnson scored more points than all of them. So that's the kind of guys we had on our team. So my role was defense. So in the Pennsylvania Classic, we played Pitt first, and they'd have me guard their best player. The next up was Duquesne, and I scored 12 points in that game and beat up the best player. The next game was Duquesne, and I don't know if you remember a guy named Norm Nixon.
Of course.
Norm Nixon is married to Debbie Allen, a famous producer and director in Hollywood. And Norm Nixon was on the Lakers with Magic Johnson. They won a championship together. Well, he played at Duquesne, in Pittsburgh. And he was my assignment. He averaged well over 20 points a game. So I had to guard him. Fouled him out. We went triple overtime in that game.
Wow.
Fouled him out of the game in the second overtime because I drew 2 charges on him. And so he was already, he didn't have much left, given that he charged a couple of times.
Right.
And there was a certain way I played them that really was effective. When he found out of the game, he actually, on his way out, he turned around, came back, and shook my hand. And that was quite an honor for me. In addition, I don't know if you read this, but my biggest claim to fame wasn't, just playing, but somehow the band, and it happened during that Pennsylvania Classic, my sophomore year against Duquesne, there's someone in the band, kind of liked the way I played. I was pretty quick. At that time, Penn didn't have really quick guards. And so I was, the quickest that they had ever seen at the time. And then they started recruiting more, quicker guards. And someone in the band started a cheer for me. So they would play the drums. You know how the bands would go, dun, dun, dun. So they would go, dun, 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 and then they would yell out, "Go Stan Green." And I'm looking up in the stands like, what the heck? Where did this come from? What? And that was quite an inspiration, for me. It kind of motivated me to really go at another gear. But this became a cheer that wasn't just for basketball games, but during Penn football games, they would do it, hockey games. And it went on for 10 years after I graduated. It was absolutely amazing. In the Palestra, they have these features, because it's like a museum now, when you're walking around, called The Great Stories of the Palestra. And I was honored to be one of those stories where they talked about this cheer that actually came up during that Pennsylvania Classic in 1976, early 1976.
I am familiar with it because I read about it. So I know it is a true story. Absolutely. No, just wonderful, a wonderful history. And again, folks, the time period, the era, which is the right word, the era in which Stan was playing was a different era of basketball. It's not the era of basketball you see on TV today, right? And so Stan is a legend without a doubt. And we're happy to have you on the program. Hey, Joe, look like you had a question. You were on mute. Go ahead.
And by
Joe.
the way, just one other point in terms of defense. We played against Tennessee my sophomore year as well. And on their team, they had a guy named Ernie Grunfeld and Bernard King. It was the Bernie and Ernie show. And Coach, we'd watch film all week leading up to the game. Coach Daly said, "Stan, that's your guy." But during that game, we only lost by 7. We had him. Ernie Grunfeld scored 36, but the guy I guarded only scored 27.
Bernard King, man, he could light them up, right? He could light them up. Joe, looked like you had a question.
Well, I was just going to ask Stan, what are his most memorable moments? I mean, do you get engrossed in the tournament like Bodine does? Do you? I mean, does it prompt some nostalgia? How does it?
Oh, it's
What do you think?
the current tournament?
The current tournament, or any tournament in particular?
Well, I mean, the current tournament and many other tournaments, the thing that kind of brings me back is watching actually one of the guys that do the color analyst for some of the games was a guy named Jim Spanarkel. I don't know if you remember that name.
Mm-hmm.
And he just gets under my skin every time I watch him because he played for Duke.
Is that because he's from Duke?
Yeah, he's from Duke. And my last college game was against Duke. We got to the Sweet 16. We're playing Duke, and they had four of their starters went on to the NBA. So they had Jim Spanarkel, they had Gene Banks out of Philadelphia, who was Coach K's. He was on Coach K's first team. Gene was a senior when Coach K took over the Duke program. But he was a freshman when they played us, and we were very close to getting him. And he came out of West Philly High, was the number one player in the country, wound up going to Duke. And then we face him in the tournament in the Sweet 16. They go up by 8 points. We come back, and then we go up by 8 points with 6 minutes left. And our coach, who had just taken over for Chuck Daly, who had gone on to the 76ers as an assistant, our coach told us to go into the kind of North Carolina four corners where you spread it, and just kind of move it around. And a couple of my teammates made the mistake of, because the lane looks wide open. They drove to the lane to go for a layup, and Mike Kaminsky comes out, blocks it. They score. The same player did it a second time. And then another one of our guards did the same thing. All ended up in blocks, all ended up in scores on the other end. The momentum shifted. We lost by 4 points. Duke goes on to play in the championship game against Kentucky. And in that game in 78, it was a guy named Jack Givens, Goose Givens, who scored 41 points, and they beat Duke. But the thing that really gets me about Spanarkel was that he drew a charge on me. That was my fifth foul. And I was out the game. So my last memory in college basketball was getting the ball in bounds and turning around, and Jim Spanarkel's right there. He draws the offensive foul. I'm out. So, that wasn't a great memory, but it was a memory. And in some ways, I was kind of pulling for Duke because, I can always say, when they say, Coach K won the whole thing, and Duke's just a story program. So, we could have beaten Duke back in 1978. But the good thing about it is it gave the team incentive the following year to go all the way to the Final Four and knock off North Carolina, Dean Smith's North Carolina, knock off Jim Boeheim's Syracuse, knock off Jim Valvano's, Jimmy V's Iona, and knock off Louis Carnesecca's St. John's. And of course, hit the brick wall when they went up against Magic Johnson and Michigan State. But was part of that Final Four with Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, who's still doing commercials today talking about that rivalry.
Absolutely.
So
it's kind of cool stuff.
And that was the advent of the start of the TV contracts and the media entertainment getting involved. And that was the beginning of the evolution of watching sports on TV instead of it being simulcast or delayed for a number of days or played at 12 o'clock midnight, right? TV is part of that formula that and the fans' participation, right, is the start of what we have today in terms of the March Madness.
I don't know if you know that there's a book written by Seth Davis called titled "When March Went Mad." And it was all about '79 with Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. And that was the point, just as you say, when March Madness really took off and the convergence of what was happening with cable TV and ESPN and all of that.
Yep.
But it also, in the book, it really chronicled how each of those teams in that Final Four got to that point. And what was interesting, what most people don't know, and I was really surprised to read about it, it was about 10 years ago when the book came out, was that Larry Bird probably would not have gotten to Indiana State had not been for my high school teammate. It's really, and it's in that book. My high school teammate, 6'11" guy named DeCosta Webster, went to Miami-Dade Junior College, and Indiana State recruited him. But it was like a package deal. His coach came, in order to get him, the coach of Indiana State convinced the coach of Miami-Dade that if Bird Webster, we called him Bird, if he went to Indiana State, that coach can come along, and then that coach would be the successor to the then coach of Indiana State. So that's what happened. He went there, and I guess the guy's name was, I think his name was Stan Evans. He was the assistant. He was expected to be the head coach at one point, and he told the head coach, "Look, let's go after some local guys. Let's get a coach in here as another assistant who has connections to the local Indiana players." And so they did that, and that particular coach got Larry Bird in, and then who then became the successor? The guy that brought my high school teammates in, he was out. The guy that brought in Larry Bird, became the head coach in '79. So really cool story.
It's amazing how sports, in that 6 degrees of separation, learning the connections and those relationships of how things happen. And it's still true today, right? With AAU basketball. I actually watched the AAU. I don't know if anybody had a chance. Adrian, I know you didn't because you were busy, but I watched the AAU basketball championships, the one in Florida that aired yesterday before March Madness started, the Final Four started. And the talent on that court and where the kids from both teams, where they're going in terms of where their commitments are, I mean, really, it is absolutely amazing. And so, I mean, who'd have thought 30 years ago, high school teams from Florida and Louisiana, I think, or maybe they're from California, would that championship game would be aired on TV? Who'd have thought that 30 years ago? So It just goes to show you. But Joe, I think you had a question.
I didn't have a question, but I found it very interesting when you were talking about the advent of television and how it played a role. And I don't know if you saw Coach K's final press conference and when they were speaking to him about, the evolution of the NCAA tournament and what he thinks should happen. And he was talking about in particular, the name, image, likeness, and how that's largely unregulated at this point, and it's really changed the landscape of the NCAA. And it'll be interesting in 10 years to see how that plays out. I was thinking that when you were speaking about the television. I mean, look at it. We have the 2 cheerleaders. There was a second incident, a second cheerleader. I mean, they both have name, image, likeness deals, and think about that degree of separation. And I'm really curious to see how that's going to play out.
Well, I told you during our last show, right? Didn't I say that the second young lady or even one of the guys, the cheerleader men that lifted them up to get the ball, the money's going to follow them, right? Somebody's going to find a way to tie in a sponsorship opportunity. Stan, I don't know if you know about this or if you read about it, but LSU's got problems.
That's what I was just about to bring up. And guys, I apologize if the background noise is too much. Let me know. But I had to come down to the lobby to get decent internet down here. But Stan, did you hear that? How LSU they fired their coach, and all 11 of their scholarship players that were not seniors, weren't graduating, or anything like that. They all entered the transfer portal.
I didn't
LSU
know
has
that.
no players.
Oh my goodness.
They have 4 players, but the 4 players are non-scholarship players. So LSU has just got a death sentence. And the reason, and we have to also caveat this by saying the reason the coach was fired is because they're under investigation for, illegal, breaking the rules. So, you make your bed, you lay in it. But can you imagine how in the world is that program going to recover in time enough to be a viable powerhouse LSU program, right? I mean, that's just crazy. So
well, this is where the transfer portal, can certainly help programs, and they have. When you look at the guy from North Carolina, Manick, I believe his name is, man, out of Oklahoma. Oh my goodness. And there are guys who have transferred in, the point guard at Miami. I mean, just all over the board, across the board. But they can also decimate programs too. If programs that are dependent on one player, or in this case with LSU, where waves of players can go, and it'll take years to recover,
unless they get lucky and get a coach who has a big platform, a big name, a big capital to come in and then bring some players in. But that'll be a problem if the school, or at least the program, is under a penalty, right? If they're under eligibility or whatever the term I'm looking for, it's escaping me right now. So if they have problems, it's going to be a while before a major Power 5 football and basketball program can get back on their feet.
right?
That's a problem.
And think about coaches that shift now. The coach of St. Peter's, who I'm sure his players absolutely love, Shaheen Holloway. Just a love affair between players and coaches.
But we saw that coming, right? We saw that coming.
What was he making? Like $260,000, and Coach Calipari, who was who he beat, was making like $8 million. That was his base salary.
We
So we
that
knew
coming.
it was gone. He was gone.
We talked about that. Didn't we talk about that, guys, on our last program?
Yeah, we did, and you could see the impact on his players, because all 15 of his St. Peter's players were at that press conference, and we saw how he really recognized them and made the Pirate Nation stand up and giving them an ovation, etc. So that was really cool, and it speaks to him as a coach and how he's seen by his players.
It's a win-win for St. Peter's, and it's a win-win for Seton Hall. No one loses in this. So people who have a negative attitude, they need to go sit down, right, and put tape over their mouth, because if you really look at it, it is a win-win situation. It helps St. Peter's. St. Peter's is going to get a lot more people applying to go to their university, right? It's bringing them a promotion and more credibility to their program. And then the coach gets an opportunity to go back where he started, right? Where he earned and the blood, sweat, and tears on that basketball court. He helped elevate that program when he was there. So I see it as a win-win. I don't see it as in a negative light at all.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the monetary aspect of what St. Peter's is going to receive from that long run in the tournament.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That may take care of their whole budget. Athletics.
Right. So those are the positive stories. And we on our program, the Bo and Joe Show, we like to be positive, right?
That's true. That is true.
So let's jump into critiquing the games yesterday, and then we'll jump into what we expect to happen on Monday. So we're going to start with Villanova, since that was the first game. Yeah. Wow.
It's a heartbreak.
Well, listen, I'm a realist. In order to be in the position I am in, and in the lane that I'm in when I'm talking about DEI, regarding sports. You have to be a realist. You have to be rational, right, and fair-minded, and not be so emotional, and be one of the, what's the term I'm looking for? A bandwagon or a rah-rah. Listen, everybody knows I bleed blue and white, and I'm lucky enough that my high school, Cheyney University, and Villanova school colors is blue and white. So I bleed literally blue and white, right? But I knew it was going to be a tough road, especially after Moore goes down and tears his Achilles, because I did the same thing. I tore my Achilles in 2013. I knew exactly what happened when I saw that slow motion review. I saw that calf pop, right? And so, and then I heard one of the other freshmen who had some rotation time was not going to be playing as well.
Longino.
So I knew it was going to be a tough road. I obviously hoped that we would win, sure, but I wasn't going to be selling myself wolf tickets. So, but I'll let you guys chime in. Go ahead.
Well, you see Chris's comment. Chris is saying Villanova had no one to guard McCormick. He dominated. So
Yeah, Chris is right. The Villanova small team, we know this. They've played a lot of big. The great thing is the number of big men that they played this year, especially with that tough early schedule. Purdue, UCLA, have some big guys with Creighton and UConn. So the thing about them is they've been so good at playing the big men and getting those big men off the box, and they could not get McCormick off of that block last night. And Chris is right; it opened everything up because he started scoring down low, then he started skip passing out side the 3-point line. Villanova has not given up that many wide open, uncontested 3-point looks. And I don't know when. So, yeah, Kansas played a great game yesterday. You got to give them all the credit with their game plan and how they executed. Abaji, six threes in a row. They couldn't miss. So Kansas just beat us, and it is what it is.
Wasn't our day. How'd you see it, Stan?
No, exactly the same way. Again, once Villanova wasn't, particularly deep. So when you start, but the starters did so well. I mean, it's not about athletic dominance with them. It is about the elevated team execution, that everybody's where they need to be at the right time, defensively and offensively. Mm-hmm. So when one of those players goes down, key player, it takes something away, especially when, for most of the year, you have that limited rotation. Mm-hmm. So obviously chemistry was affected. And while they weren't particularly big, they still were effective, but, with McCormick, it changed everything from him because, he was just so strong inside that they couldn't do anything with him. And that coupled with, what they were having, going on from an offensive standpoint with the loss of, Moore, they just couldn't. And even then, they made some runs.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So
I think one of the biggest keys for me in those runs, we saw Caleb Daniels. Caleb Daniels got in 3 different occasions, he got open looks at the 3-point line, and all 3 of them went in and out of the basket. It could have stayed down just as easily as they came out. And the thing that was so important about those was those 3 shots were when we had gotten to within 8-7 points. So if those shots had gone in a 7-point game became a 4-point game. And at that point, Kansas could have started to feel some pressure. But we just did not get close enough. I think the closest we got was within 6. We didn't get close enough for Kansas to feel any of the pressure and maybe make some mistakes that would get us in a position to take over that game.
We didn't have the 4-guard rotation that we had when Kyle Lowry was there and Mike Nardi and Foy and that crew. You remember that crew? I mean, we didn't have that crew, right? We had, we have 2 and then some power, some small forwards. And McCormick was not only big, he was athletic. And that combination, in my eyes, my opinion, hurt us. And I saw Charles, what we call CB1, Charles Barkley, say, let McCormick eat and protect the 3-point line. And we didn't do that, right? And so when you let McCormick eat and you don't protect the 3-point line, that it was, our fate was sealed. Did you see the game, Joe? Were you in mourning for us?
I watched some of the game. I did not see all the game, but I was flipping around and I was watching for you. Yes, and I was heartbroken for you.
Good. Well, listen, we had a great year. We're not going anywhere. And Stan, would you have ever thought that Villanova would be considered a blue blood? In the same sentence with the Kansas, the UCLAs, the Duke, the North Carolinas. Is that amazing?
It is amazing. Winning that national championship with Arthur Diacono, passing it off and beating UNC. But then to come back just a few years later and do it again.
2018. Yep.
I just never would have imagined that they would be at that level. But Jay Wright, kudos to him. And it's not like he gets the best players in the country. He's not doing what Coach K and the other blue bloods. I said the other blue bloods. His is strictly coaching.
Right.
Right. Those guys are getting players, and quite frankly, they're unable to do what you would expect they would be able to do with the caliber of players that they're getting in. Duke's loading up again.
Mm-hmm.
There's this one kid my son coaches against. My son coaches at Morristown Friends in Morristown, New Jersey, and they're not allowed to recruit. So they'll get kids, smart kids, but don't play basketball and say, hey, you want to play basketball this year? We're going out. And then they'll go up against the guy who's going to Duke is like number 1 or number 2 in the country, Derek Lively, 7'1" guy. And then all of these other players, when they play against a team like Westtown, which is in their conference. But these are the teams that, or the players that Duke, Kentucky are going after. And what's interesting is they can't seem to dominate the way you would expect them to dominate with the level of players that they're getting. I think in part it's because those players expect that they're only going to be there 1 year, and their job, they say they're part of the team, but their job is really to showcase themselves
for the draft.
Be a high draft pick.
Yeah.
I doubt if they even go to class in the second semester of their freshman year. It's like, hey, we're done. All right, agent, what are we going to do here?
That's why it's a testament to what Jay Wright is doing and how he is
exactly
built a program.
That's the point.
Yeah,
this guy's getting nowhere near that caliber player, and he puts together solid teams. And I think part of it is because these players are not going to bolt after 1 year. They'll get a chance to gel and to really understand the system. And he can still say to them, hey, look at my track record in terms of the pros. The guy whose bridges over in Phoenix and
Shalik Bay, and what is
Detroit.
He scores 50 points.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of a Villanova former basketball player dropping 50 and being on a list with KD, LeBron, Kyrie? So we're developing players that the league knows can play basketball. So that's what's helping them when they get it. They may not be drafted as a lottery pick. What's the lottery pick? Top 12, top 15? They consider a lottery pick or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But if you get drafted in the first or second round, the chances are, if you're a Villanova former player, you're going to make the team. You're going to sign at least a one or two opportunities to sign a contract. Your first four years contract, and then that second, because you know what it's all about. The goal is to get to that second contract. So, I mean, I think I saw.
I mean, you're not drafted to be the top scorer ultimately with a team.
Right.
You're drafted to help that team succeed. And so a Jay Wright coach player is a two-way player. You play offense, they play defense.
Yep.
You know how to help, on defense. They know how to pass, and, and make the extra pass on offense. And that's value. Now a team is still going to have those, super scores.
Right.
They need the kind of players that Jay Wright turns out, Jalen Brunson's.
Yes.
Well, yeah. And that's what I was going to say. And they do it in different ways. So you look at Sadiq Bey in Detroit, and he's a scorer. And then you look at Mikal Bridges. Mikal Bridges, like you, Stan, Mikal Bridges gets the toughest defensive responsibility every game. Jalen Brunson, and I think Jason Kidd going to Dallas was the best thing to happen for Jalen Brunson, because true point guard leading him moves him into the starting lineup because he understands the value and takes the ball out of Doncic's hands a little bit. And they're better now. They could potentially win an NBA championship. So, yeah, it's great to see what he's producing. That's why Jay is, I believe, now that Coach K is leaving, in most places, he's considered the best college coach in the country.
Well, don't forget about Kyle Lowry. Don't forget about the kid from Delaware who they call the white Michael Jordan, who played for
DiVincenzo.
DiVincenzo. Yeah, he got hurt. Yep.
So we're producing talent that is producing in the league. And I think I heard a stat, and I don't know if it's true, so somebody can fact check me on this, but there's 5 players in the NBA who have won 2 national championships. In other words, they have 2 March Madness rings. And out of those 5 players, there are 3 Villanovans on that list. So That's saying something.
Wow.
Right? So, when you look behind the curtain and look at the foundation, it's a really good program. But we can talk about Nova all day long. Let's not do that. Let's jump into the Duke North Carolina game. Listen, it was an instant classic. Those guys were going toe to toe. And I'm not a connoisseur of basketball to know what this stat means. But when you have 17 or 20 lead changes, that means they're going back and forth, right, Stan? I'm assuming that's what that means.
Oh, yeah, correct.
Yep.
What's the average number of lead changes per game? Is it under 10? Is it just over 10?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But when it's 17 to 20, they're going back and forth.
Well, yesterday, that was a track meet. That was a classic track meet. Nothing but high-level players on the court. Doing their thing. I think the thing for me when it came to Duke was at certain times of the game when it was tight, they're going back and forth, especially later in the second half. The thing that kind of hurt them was Banchero, their number 1 player. A couple times he tried to take on the entire team. And he tried to do it all by himself. And I get how he could do that, but half court situations where he's out on the wing and then he's going to just try to, he's trying to get to the rim. I get what he's doing, but he got a little bit too ball dominant in the second half. And then there were three free throws that were missed by Duke late in the game that were crucial in helping Carolina win that game.
I think the free throws is the key. That play by the player you're talking about, they all are studs. They all are confident. So they all at one point in time took shots that they should not have taken, right? So I don't blame the kid, for doing that, because he's 6'7", 250 or 6'5", 250. That's a LeBron James, right? In terms of size. He's not a Kevin Durant, 210 pounds. So he's trying to take over the game. I don't blame him for that because, again, I think all the players took shots and missed some that they should not have taken. They should have been a little bit more patient. But we all know as free throws go, so goes the team. And that's what helped Villanova get to the point to make the March Madness. All the other teams they were playing were missing their free throws. We were making ours. And you look at the end of the score at the end of the game, you make 3 more free throws and you got a chance to tie the game or go into overtime. Talk about how important free throws are, Stan, because you were pretty good at it.
Well, Chris is saying Duke was only 60% from the free throw line. So
It hurt them.
Yeah.
That hurt them.
Yeah, it is critical. Well, I learned my lesson against Villanova when I missed that second foul shot of the 1-and-1, but I kept practicing that. By senior year, I was about 80% during my senior year. So it's really, really important, especially when it's a tight game. And I can only imagine how the center, I believe it's Mark Williams, who was on the line. You saw the grimace on his face when he missed that, and
they showed it.
I felt for him because that could have made the difference for them.
If Coach K was going to lose to anybody, I mean, that was an impressive game. I love that their campuses are 11 miles apart. I mean, the rivalry is probably really palpable down there, because they're so closely aligned, even in proximity. So, it was a heartbreaking loss for him, but the game was phenomenal. I mean, at least he wasn't going out with a 30-point loss. He was going out with a loss against their hometown rival in a close game and really some powerhouse plays.
I think with Duke, you may have heard Coach K talk about it over the past few years. He started to go to more zone defense, and which is, again, kind of against what he likes to do. But I think it's been the impact of getting the super high level recruits who are high level because of their scoring. So what happens and then you compound that by the fact that they're expecting to be one and done. So there's really no incentive for them to really play the type of defense that wins championships. The type of defense that wins championships is team defense. And this is when folks step in to take charges. They'll step in to discourage a drive to the basket and force a person to dump it back out to someone else or pull the ball back out. These little things over the course of the game compound, and effectively what it means that a team is going to score perhaps in the 50s and 60s instead of in the 70s and 80s. And Duke, over the past few years, while they've brought in some really good offensive players, have not been able to capture the real tough team defense that Villanova, for example, plays, or University of Virginia plays, which is absolutely essential, especially when you're making a run, in March Madness.
Right.
So I think that at the end of the day, that's what lost it for them. I think, what was it? UNC scored about 80 points, 81 points. That's a lot of points. The secret to St. Peter's success was being able, think about the powerhouses they played, but they were able to get under their skin and get them to not produce and not have the kind of comfort offensively that they were used to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they were able to make that run. And you see it time and time again. And you've heard the saying, defense wins championships. And the teams that can do the effective job on defense, going back to Villanova's first ever championship. Think about who they played. Georgetown, Patrick Ewing, and all those, powerhouse players. It was their defense, their team defense, was able to stifle them and keep themselves close enough to ultimately win that game.
Talk
And
about
there-
being
and there-
connected defensively.
And there was no
Right.
shot, and there was no shot clock, which was a great strategy, right?
That's right. That's true. That's very true.
That was the special sauce, right? Folks who are not familiar with basketball played before that time don't realize that the advent of the shot clock speeds the game up, right?
Right.
So
Right.
Coach Mass obviously came up with that strategy, and that's what helped keep the score low, play good defense, and then when you have, what did we shoot? 78%.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, it was
You know,
phenomenal. And they had
when-
to. Yeah.
When you don't miss a shot, right?
Yeah.
You're hot, right? Hey, I mean, that was our freshman year, so Ferris and I will never forget.
Let's not get too deep into that.
Wow. Now, how about the women's games, folks?
I was going
oh
to bring
my
it. There you
goodness.
go, brother. There you go, brother.
Yeah, we usually get to it after the fact. We're already at the top of the hour. I got to throw the women in there. So
Oh my goodness. They were spectacular games.
they were spectacular.
Yeah.
Absolutely, without a
So-
doubt. Villanova
Championship tonight. Championship game tonight.
Villanova women's upset their first game. They were able to upset BYU, and then ran into was it Michigan,
Yeah.
and lost to them. But they did well.
Creighton went deep.
Yeah.
A lot of the Big East women went deep and are doing well. But the women's game is absolutely amazing. If you haven't watched a women's game, I'm telling you, you don't know what you're missing.
Yeah.
Especially those top teams.
Yeah.
They play basketball.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Chris is saying, go Paige Bucher. I agree. It was hard to, if you watched her, it was hard to imagine that she was out for 19 games this season because of injury. She was phenomenal, and she's going up. She'll be in the finals tonight. You had Aaliyah Boston, another great player from South Carolina. You also had I think she's a sophomore. No, she's a junior. Bria Beal. She had a great layup last night. So I'm looking forward to that game tonight more so than the men's.
Yeah.
I like them both, but I'm
Understandably, Joe. Understandably.
I'm going to look forward to the women.
And
Well,
it's
Joe-
Philadelphia's own Dawn Staley.
And Gino. And Gino.
Oh, yes. And Gino. Right.
Gino.
That's
He's
right.
going for number 12.
So
Right, from
you're
Philadelphia.
talking major I mean, people really don't understand how Philadelphia is ingrained in basketball from all aspects, right?
Mhm.
It is truly, a 1-and-1 comparing it to football. Basketball here that's what I learned coming from the South, right? That in the South, we know football is our second religion. Well, here, basketball is the second religion, right? It's
Yeah.
all about basketball. And from the refs who come out of Philadelphia market, and I say market, tri-state area, Jersey, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Delaware, the players, coaches, it is a hub for basketball. And you know that, Stan.
Yeah. One of the women players at Villanova, and I believe they upset UConn this year.
We did.
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
You guys did that. And one of the players, Bella Runyon is her name.
Mm-hmm. John Runyon.
My son actually trained her
Really?
Wow.
off season, and she's John Runyon's daughter. Remember
Mhm.
John Runyon, lineman,
Philadelphia Eagles. Yep.
6'7", I think he was, for
Philadelphia
Philadelphia
Eagle.
Eagles. And I
Yep.
think his son, her brother, plays for the Green Bay Packers.
As an offensive guard.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
No, lots of connections. Absolutely. No
Yeah.
doubt about it. One of the players on the Villanova team grew up right around the corner from where I live. And so I see the family. I mean, they literally have, the basketball portable thing in the driveway, and all of the kids for years have been out there shooting the hoop in the cold, in the summer, in the spring, in the fall. So it was destined, and obviously there's the family connection, kind of a legacy to Villanova, but she's earned her opportunity to play for the women's basketball team. So, but yeah, I'm going to watch that game tonight because
Oh yeah.
Dawn
Who
Staley.
do you guys have? First of all, who do you have for the women, and then who do you have for the men? Who's winning tonight? Who's winning tonight for the women?
I'm rooting for Dawn Staley, South Carolina.
I'm going for UConn.
I think with Becker back, I'm going with UConn.
Me too.
Yeah, I got to go for Philadelphia's own Dawn, and of course Gino's Philadelphia's own, but Dawn's. I like to see her get her second one.
Yep.
Second
Yep.
championship.
Absolutely.
Although I'm a big Paige Beckers fan, and she's just amazing. So fluid.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Chris is saying UConn by 4. All right, well.
Okay.
That's
All right,
specific, Chris.
All right, so you better come on Wednesday night to the regular scheduled the Bo and Joe show at 9 p.m. to because if you won, we're gonna celebrate you. If you're not by 4, we're gonna heckle you a little bit. We like to do that.
So Chris was one of the guys I was hanging out this weekend here at the Final Four.
Oh, okay.
All right, so he's in the zone. He's in the
New viewer.
Great.
Well, let's do our picks for the men's. Who we got?
Chris is saying, let's do this. Thanks. So we appreciate you tuning in, and we're looking forward to talking to you on Wednesday. Of course, you know who I'm going with. I have to go with the underdog. I'm going with North Carolina.
Same here.
Yeah, personally, I mean, I had Kansas in my bracket, and Kansas has been playing well, but Carolina, since they beat Duke, has been playing at Cameron. They have been playing out of this world, and I said it to one of my friends that they are going to have to be watched out for in this tournament, and it was absolutely right. I'm going with Carolina as well.
So you're a win-win either way, Adrian. You got the bracket covered and so you're getting props either way.
Yeah, I've gone against my bracket a little bit, but it's the eye test, right?
What about you, Stan?
Yeah, UNC. I just think I was just looking at the rankings. I guess the last rankings that they did, and UNC was in the kind of the other category. They weren't in that top 25. It was like others under consideration, and UNC was there. So to accomplish what they've accomplished, I'd love to see them go all the way and make it happen, because I remember a few months ago, there was some doubts about whether they made the right choice in coaches. And I'm loving the run, and I'd like for them to just take it all the way. And another reason is because Penn beat UNC, to get to the Final Four. So it continues to give us those bragging rights. Yeah, you see that program? Yeah, we beat them once.
Mr. Sanders has North Carolina as well. And what about you, Bodine?
Yeah, I'm going with North Carolina, and a small reason is Kansas is a blue blood. Part of their colors is blue, but they got a little red in it. I can't do that. I got to go strictly blue and white, and so it's North Carolina.
And what about you, Chris? You gave us the women's. We're waiting on the men's. We got to get your prediction as well. If you're still listening, if you're still out there. All right, so we got two. Oh, crispy bacon. Chris, what about you? What do you have for the women and the men? I was talking about Chris Gross, but come on, Chris, and tell us yours.
Yeah, on the men's, I think I have Kansas winning. I also had Villanova, but they're out. So Kansas is one on the men.
Okay.
And then I'm not sure on the women.
All right. Well, Chris Gross is saying Kansas on the men as well. So that's interesting. We're all going with North Carolina except for the two Chris's. So it'll be interesting to see. Interesting to see Wednesday night. So we have a big week, right? We have tonight, tomorrow, and then Wednesday we have the regular, the Bo and Joe show. We'll be breaking it all down again. So I don't know. Any closing thoughts, anybody?
Well, obviously, we want to thank Stan, and I know you will, but I'll start with that. Thanks, Stan, for coming on. We appreciate it. It was informative. We learned a lot and definitely entertaining. So we appreciate it. We appreciate your time because you could have been doing something else.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dan. We appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity, folks. Really appreciate it. It was fun. It was a lot of fun.
So I'm going to capitalize on that. And it's always good. It's always nice to have somebody break up the rivalry between the real rivalry, the Bodine Sanders, Adrian Ferris rivalry. So thank you. Thank you, Stan, for coming on and taking care of that. I appreciate it. I'm going to, Bodine's right. I learned a lot tonight about, certainly I didn't realize how impressive your basketball run was. And thank you for sharing that journey with us. I want to give Adrian a special shout out for giving us a play-by-play from New Orleans and bringing on a new listener. Great to be a new listener. Great job. Thank you, Chris. We really appreciate that. Of course, we have Chris P. Bacon behind the scenes. He's our main man and on the court and off. We have Dave tuned in. Of course, our other biggest fan, Mr. Sanders, is always here as well. And we're looking forward to a great week. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and we're looking forward to seeing you Wednesday night. And cheers to all the players, regardless of whether you made it to the Final Four and any youth who are out there playing sports. We always like to give them a shout out because you could be sitting home and playing video games and you're out, team camaraderie and to the parents who support them. So we'll close with that. And hopefully we see your children in the NCAA tournament as well someday. So, all right, you can play us out, Chris. Thanks, everybody.